It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by Agile Dad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. A student in a recent ScrumMaster class had a good question for me, one that I really wasn't prepared to answer. They asked me, what's the difference between a Scrum Master and a release train engineer? Now, release train engineer obviously comes from SAFe, and I wanted to make sure that I gave them good context and I answered their question correctly. So I asked, why might you be asking this? And they said, well, I'm considering a career change. I'm considering changing from being just a regular Scrum Master to a release train engineer. And I asked if they really wanted me to dig into the difference. And of course, I gave them a high level answer and I promised that I would record a podcast episode that went through the rest. So this one's for you, Jonathan. A Scrum Master is a coach who primarily works at the team level. So they're working specifically with 1 to 3 teams based on their skill set. They are the governor of those teams. They help the team understand and identify where problems lay, and they help the team find tools to solution and solve those problems. They create clear communication paths. They do anything they can to improve their practices within the Scrum framework. A release train engineer, on the other hand, works in the context of an organization that is using SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework, and they work primarily at the program level. They coach people on how to use an Agile release train, which is a whole set of teams that typically consist of anywhere from 50 to a couple of hundred people, 150 people. So the release train engineer is often referred to as an RTE, and a lot of people like to call them the Chief Scrum Master. So I don't know that the description Chief Scrum Master is perfect because they are acting at different levels and behaving at different levels, but there are some skills that overlap. So, a couple of examples. Scrum Masters serve product owners by finding techniques for effective product goal definition and by helping with backlog refinement. RTEs work with product managers to facilitate continuous exploration that drives synthesis of the vision, roadmap, and backlog. That's pretty close, right? Scrum Master is responsible for causing the removal impediments and to help the team progress in their Scrum implementation. RTEs have a responsibility to escalate and track impediments and make sure they're getting resolved. Once again, very close. Scrum Masters generally facilitate team events, or at least ensure that they're happening, such as the daily stand up, sprint planning, sprint reviews, sprint retrospectives. Release train engineers facilitate program level events like the Agile Release Train Synchronization or PI planning or the Inspect and Adapt event. So I guess there are pretty similar things that go through with both of those roles. There's a common thread, right? But there are some things that are key differences between the two. So let's give you a couple of those. For example, RTEs work within SAFe, which has the concept of PI or PI planning, and program increments or PIs are planned it's typically a 2 day planning event where the entire Agile release train plans together to align on goals and objectives and collaborate on cross team dependencies for the next 8 to 12 week period. The PI contains sprints, which are commonly 2 week time boxes. Scrum Masters work within the sprints for a month or less, most commonly 2 weeks. And depending on their organizational context, Scrum Masters who are not working in SAFe may or may not have an event that's similar to PI planning in their organization. Now, those of you who know me know that my big thing that I promote is rapid release planning. And it's very close to PI planning. It just happens a lot faster. Scrum Masters can work in an organization of any size, as long as they have at least one team that they're going to be working with. RTEs only work in large organizations, enterprises that have enough teams to form an Agile release train, typically 50 plus people. So if you think about it, there are definitely key differences. But what you have to consider is that there are reasons why a Scrum Master may or may not want to become an RTE. So let's start with a couple of reasons why a Scrum Master might want to try to become a release train engineer. If you find that you're interested in working at the program level, RTE is probably right for you. Their focus is on optimizing the flow of value across an entire train rather than being accountable for a single team's effectiveness or a couple of teams' effectiveness. They're usually involved at a more strategic level and higher level planning activities like facilitating the creation of product roadmaps, portfolios, etc. So they want to make sure they're working at a higher level. They also You might want to become a release train engineer if you like to work with senior managers and stakeholders. RTEs tend to work with and interact with the more senior leaders and stakeholders than Scrum Masters typically would work with on a daily basis. If you enjoy large scale facilitation and scaling events for 100, 125, 150 people, then RTE is definitely your jam. If you're interested in working on an enterprise context and trying to figure out how to work in large scale enterprises, the RTE is your jam. If you want to gain additional experience within SAFe, but you have experience as a Scrum Master, but not a lot of SAFe experience, this is a great opportunity. The RTE is a good role to transition into. Now, just like there are reasons why you might want to become a release train engineer, there are probably also reasons why you don't want to be an RTE. So let's talk about those. If you prefer working in a Scrum team, now some Scrum Masters prefer working at the team level, and that's what they like, then you probably won't do as well as a release train engineer. If you don't like to speak in front of large groups or facilitate large groups of people, this is not going to work for you. If you're not wanting to work at the enterprise level and work with those senior leaders, Scrum RT is not going to work for you. If you want to work within a framework with a neutral environment or use an alternative framework other than SAFe, then you're going to have to start thinking, right? Now, honestly, if you want to be a Scrum Master and you don't want to use SAFe, there's always less, which is large enterprise scaled Scrum. And that basically is scaled Scrum. So you can still be a Scrum Master there, but you just have to consider what your organization is trying to do and whether or not you're prepared to take on those additional responsibilities as a release train engineer. So, what does a Scrum Master need to do? What do they need to learn to become a release train engineer? I would argue that they probably need to know a lot about lean product development because a lot of the SAFe principles come from there. They need to know about value stream mapping and how to understand value streams and how they work. They also need to understand large scale facilitation and meetings that have a couple hundred people. They need to be familiar with liberating structures, World Cafe, open space, rapid release planning, all the things that are necessary in order for them to do it. Now, one of the things that's interesting is in order to become a release train engineer, you need to take the Scaled Agile 3-day course. But I would argue that it's probably important for you to also have that SAFe Scrum Master or SAFe product owner under your belt so that you really understand the context of what they do in SAFe so that the release train engineer training makes sense. So there's definitely a path to becoming a release train engineer. It's just a matter of getting the right certifications, understanding the materials, and really digging in with a coach that's done both so that you can ask the right questions, ask the powerful questions and get the answers. So I hope that was helpful to you. I hope you learned a lot. If you have a topic you want us to cover, and remember, you can reach out to us, learn more at agiledad.com. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.